So we'll start with a show of hands, actually. Who here uses Phoenix like on a day-to-day basis at their jobs? That's most. That's great. Who has used Wallaby before? A few, yeah. Playwright. Anybody used Playwright before? Okay, also quite a few. That's cool. So it's roughly what I'm talking about today. And we'll start with the test pyramid here. I'm sure you've seen it in some version before. Basically, at the bottom are tests that they're fast to execute, and they're usually fairly cheap to write and maintain. And the top, they get slower. They're more expensive overall. So at the bottom, we'd have our unit tests. Then above that, integration tests, so kind of like integration of multiple units. Feature tests, that's what we're mostly talking about today. Yeah, and here, we're going a step up because we're describing the system from a user's perspective. We're talking about the actual features front to back. Because a unit in itself, a unit of code, won't help your user, okay? And you won't notice if something overall breaks, you need these higher level tests for them, even though they might be a bit more expensive to write. Or will they be? Yeah? Stay tuned. And above that, acceptance tests. Here it's more about the business perspective and Cucumber, Gherkin, like these layers in between. So the business side can specify tests. And end-to-end, depends on who you ask, but my definition for today is end-to-end is when you actually spin up the whole infrastructure, including load balancers, web application firewalls, etc., and test against that versus just spinning up like a test server in a CI pipeline, okay? We're looking at feature tests. So what does that pyramid look like for Phoenix, roughly, okay? Phoenix ships with contests, live view tests, they're pretty much at the bottom. Unit testing or integration testing, depending on how you want to look at it. And sure, you could put your own layers on top and try to write feature tests with that. But usually, nowadays, you're going to go for Wallaby or Playwright, as that some of you have worked with already. So Wallaby's been there for a long time. Playwright is kind of in the works for Elixir. And there's also Phoenix Test, and that's going to be the focus for today's talk. Let's have a quick look at Playwright for those that don't know it, because Playwright is similar also to Selenium, to these other browser-based solutions. So the real idea is we want to test the system in the way that the user would also use it. So what do? We spin up an actual browser, and we interact with that browser, okay? Browser on the right side, our system on the left, and there's some protocol in between. For Playwright, it's the Chrome DevTools protocol. So this is funny, Firefox, and they all implement the Chrome DevTools protocol. It's just the de facto standard now. And our server, our tests talk to something in between, okay? For Playwright, it's the Node.js server. And I did promise a quick look into other ecosystems, because historically, Elixir, fairly young, so we've borrowed from other ecosystems. We also give back. And the obvious candidate is Ruby on Rails. So Ruby, Rails ships with an application system test case. And that allows you to write tests like this. And remember, user perspective. We visit some path, so that might be the entry point, the user entering the URL or finding us via Google. They fill in a form. They fill in a field, an email field, a password field, and they click something named register, and they expect to see that their account was created, okay? We're not doing any HTTP posts or asserting on a HTTP status 200, because the user usually does not care about that if we're talking about a web UI. All right? That's implemented for Rails with Capybara, so named after this furry animal. And Capybara has a few drivers. The default one is rack test, and rack is comparable to plug in Elixir land. So it's with this, you can test anything that's like a dead view, controller-based. Okay? But as soon as you want to or have to get more fancy and add JavaScript to the mix, or stimulus, reflex, these kinds of things in the Rails world, you need to switch to Selenium, comparable to Playwright, or something like Cuprite, also similar, also uses the Chrome DevTool protocol. Okay? So that's what there is for Rails, and there's a kind of a gap in the Phoenix world until recently. So beginning of this year, Herman Valesko announced that he's writing a library called Phoenix Test. Has anybody heard of it before? Fair few, really cool. So I can just recommend that you check this out. If you're writing Phoenix apps at all, we were quite excited in the dev team about it and have been using it since. And Arno, who's actually here, he said right away, hey, like there's Phoenix Test, it has a static driver and a live driver. So it's pretty smart, like it detects, are you in a dead view, are you in a live view, and then it just chooses the right driver. There's nothing you have to do manually. So it doesn't matter if you're crossing boundaries, you're crossing from a dead view into a live view, you don't have to worry about it, because the user doesn't have to worry about it, right? And Arno said, well, why is there not something like a Wallaby driver or a Playwright driver, right? Why the user doesn't care that there's JavaScript, so why should the test developer care about it? And that stuck in my head, so that's something I've been trying to work on and discussing with Herman and trying to get into the library. It's not there yet. It's en route, but I want to give a sneak peek, okay? So, demo time. Let's hope this all works. I'm looking forward to it. So, we're just going to start with pretty much a vanilla mix Phoenix new. So I'm assuming this is something you all know. I did this in advance, so all the dependencies are here. And you've probably seen the standard authentication that we can generate, okay? And sure, we need some parameters. And we're going to assume this was done a few years back when it was still all dead view, all right? This is a legacy application, so no live view, it's dead view. Please generate for me, okay? And let's have a look at what that looks like. Just to get everybody on board real quick, run migrations. We're going to register, okay? Fill in an email, maybe a password. Oh, I submitted via the enter button there. We get an error message, the password is too short, okay? Longer one, enter, success, user created, okay? And let's have a quick look at what tests are generated for us. Okay, there are lots of tests. One of them is the user registration controller test. Can everybody see that all right? Yeah, okay, in the back, nodding, good. User registration controller test, and I'm going to scroll down a bit. And what we see here is pretty clearly not a feature test, okay? This is somewhere integration test to unit test level. We see an HTTP post with some handcrafted data, okay? We have no idea if there's an input field for that on that page. We see a redirect being asserted on. We have to do a new GET request, and a user doesn't do this, right? So we're going to try to do better. We want to describe the core features, and let's just assume logging in or registering is one of the core features of our app. It's a registration app, okay? So I've prepared a little something. It's a pretty vanilla test case. We're using a Phoenix test case. And we're starting out with a con, just like a normal con case would, okay? And for now, we're just going to visit the root path, click a link, and open the browser. And this might feel familiar. Yeah, we get this snapshot. So this is not interactive. If you've done any live view testing before with open browser, you might know this. This is just an HTML snapshot. I can't navigate anywhere here, but I can inspect the whole DOM and do some error finding, debugging. And the nice thing is Phoenix Test adds this for dead views. Because remember, right now, we're still in a dead view, and that's something I've always missed for dead views. I don't get this. I have to manually copy out the HTML if I need to do this kind of work. So Phoenix Test already adds a nice helper. Great. So after that, I always like to start with a refute, okay? There should be no error message when we visit the page. Going to fill in an email, fill in a password, submit the form, and then we want to see an error message, okay? And just to make sure it's really doing something, going to open the browser again, run that. All right, the next snapshot. We see everything filled in, it was submitted, and we do see the error. That means our test should have passed, and it did, okay? And now, happy case, this is what we really should be testing in a feature test usually. We're going to fill in a long password and make sure, oh, I didn't save it, did I? Sorry, save it. And run it one more time. And this time, there we go. User created successfully, and it all worked, okay? So far, I'd say a win for the code base because we have a pretty descriptive test, okay? I mean, these CSS classes, they're not nice, but apart from that, I can read this and I can understand what the feature is. Whereas looking at the controller tests, I couldn't really, or as a developer I can, but not by just reading it quickly, okay? Now comes the cool part. We're going to reset the whole repository to the state it was in before, okay? And then we're going to run the generator again. And this time we're going to generate it for live view. And while I'm doing that, think for yourselves, if you've ever done this in the past, if you've ever thrown away a dead view and replaced it with a live view, what that meant for your test base, for your tests, okay? Anytime I've done it, it was pretty horrible, unless they were already Wallaby tests. Okay, regenerating. And just going to pull this code back in, this test code. And the promise is that this should run, okay? Now let's see what happens. Mix test. Going to run this test again. And, oh, open browser is in there, but it's failing, okay? And it usually, live view test vanilla, you'd be asserting on this old HTML and saying, I expect my HTML to contain a text string. And then if you've seen that fail before, well, you have this big HTML string, and it's truncated usually, and okay, it's failing, but what is the fix for this? Okay, Phoenix Test has your back. This is great work by Herman, because you provide, or you can provide a selector with it. You can say, I expect like a success flash with a text user created. And it's telling me, well, I didn't find that. But I did find another flash info with a text success account created, okay? And so apparently the sneaky Phoenix team just changed around the texts while switching from static to live view. And if we fix that, then, I still have the open browser, but the test is passing, okay? And I think this is pretty cool, especially if you see how long this took, okay? The entire round trip with everything, half a second. This is not comparable at all to browser-based testing as you'd have with Wallaby or Playwright. Because that's the main thing that puts me off writing those tests. I know they will take a long time to run, they might be a bit more flaky, and they'll be more expensive to maintain, okay? Here we get the best of both worlds, fast execution, good error messages, and still a high-level API, all right? Now, the evolution of a feature test. We're going to evolve it one step further. So far what you've seen is pretty much in the library already. Oh yeah, maybe one thing to point out. So I already said this does more than just posting the HTTP data. It makes sure these input fields are there. This submit, and after every step we're doing kind of the render change, the live validation, everything, okay? So we don't need this submit at all. Yeah, we have a live validation. We can throw that out now, and just to make sure that's still working, let's run the test one more time. And sure it is, yeah? So that's good. It shows you every cycle is being run. Live, re-renders, validations, and yeah. The submit, by the way, here, if you've seen the code before for this generator, you know it does the whole Phoenix trigger action in the background. So you have a live validation, and then you have this trigger action attribute set to true, and then we do a full HTTP post after all, and all that is hidden away. Phoenix Test takes care of that. Okay. But now, unfortunately, time passes, and we've got this really bad news from management. They've said, well, the service that we wrote is just too good. You know, users are registering left and right, and there's just no way, there's no money to scale out the system. And what's really killing us is this registration form, because it's doing, it's crazy, on every keystroke, yeah, we're doing a server round trip and validation, we just can't do it. So there's no other way to solve this, you have to disable it, and we have to do this client side, okay? So client side, okay. We're gonna need a hook for that, all right? So I'm gonna write a hook, and then put in an error message, okay? That's gonna be password error, and okay, it should be hidden at first because that's what happened before, and should be at least 12 characters, okay? There we go. Now, let's just have a look, see that that's all working as expected. And obviously, error here is indented a little. I'll skip that. Have a look. Run migrations. Reset it in the meantime. Register. No error message, that's good. There we go, okay. And I can see we're still missing some styling there. We want that to be red. We should add that. So that's this text rows, not red, rows 600. All right, great. And all right, that worked. I saw it in the browser, wonderful. So our feature tests should still be passing, right? Or does anybody see a potential problem with that? I hear some laughter, so I guess yes. Well, it's failing, but maybe it's failing one step earlier than you thought. It's already failing at line 12, at this refute has, because Phoenix Test is not clever enough to know about CSS visibility, okay? if you've worked with Wallaby or Playwright before, they do take this kind of stuff into account. Yeah, if it's like display none or has a height of 0 or something, then that would, in this case, succeed. So it would assume it's invisible and not fail here. But Phoenix test is not there yet. I don't know if that's something that we would want to consider in the future. All right, so we have to, it's not very feature testy, but we have to do this. We have to say it's not hidden, okay? So we'll add that down here as well. This is not something I want to see in a feature test, but bear with me. Run it again, and now we're failing on line 16, where you probably expected it to fail. And the reason, I've hinted at it before, is, well, we're not running an actual browser, okay? We have a custom JavaScript hook, and that's a problem, because Phoenix test, which under the hood uses LiveView test, does not know about our custom JavaScript hook. It's okay with Phoenix LiveView JS, yeah, because the LiveView tests the whole DOM operations that are implemented for these standard LiveView JS functions, but not our custom JavaScript. And, well, in the past, what would I have done? I would have thrown away my entire test and rewritten it all to, with Wallaby, okay? Or if I'd been a bit clever beforehand, I might have my own API on top. That was kind of where you could switch out some kind of driver underneath, but who takes the time to write that, okay? So, now, a quick sneak peek into the future. This is not quite there yet, but what you can hopefully do soon is that you switch out the driver manually and say that, okay, we want to use Playwright, the Playwright driver, and we want to fire up Chrome. Unfortunately, that's the only one that's available via the Playwright Elixir library right now, but more to come. And just so that we have something to see here, I'm going to start it in non-headless mode, so actually run a browser. And this is a cool Playwright feature. We can go slow motion. I'm going to do 900 milliseconds. I would use a second, but there's a weird timeout error, so that doesn't work. 900 milliseconds in between each step so that we could see something. And I do currently have to add that to every test, because I could choose to run some with JS and some without. All right? And that is, without changing anything else, we can run the same test and see it succeed, okay? Running the test, up comes a browser, click register, filling in the email, filling in the password. This is JS generated. Now submitting the whole thing, and bam, account user created, okay? From a code perspective, this was pretty unspectacular, but I hope that in your hearts as a developer, you can see that this is pretty cool. Okay? It makes me happy. I hope it'll make you happy in the future, so stay tuned for anything that's coming there. It's really fun working on this. I think it's a great library, worth checking out for sure. Great job by Haman. So feature tests, I hope in the future will equal Phoenix test. Don't lose it, reuse it, yeah, okay? You don't have to throw it away. Hopefully your feature test evolves with your application as it evolves from static view to live view to, in the future, JavaScript custom hooks, okay? And sure, there's other stuff left to do in Phoenix test. It's not perfect by all means yet, yeah? Like more advanced use cases, if you've used Playwright before, locators that you can chain and like get more granular, that's still missing, okay? But there's room for improvement. It's definitely usable already. All right. That was it from me. I'm Freddy. That's my full name, Fredrik Teschke. Freelance developer, that's where you can find me. On the side, I founded Borg and Gaudi with a friend of mine, so Arrow Tag. If you've never played Arrow Tag, check it out. It's like paintball, but with bows and arrows. We deliver that via postal service, so it's great for team events, great for birthday parties, etc. Have a look, in Germany at least. And currently also consulting for this company, Team Engine. They're based in the UK, and they do digital contracting, time recording for the film and TV industry. So, neat little company, really fun to work for. Yeah. That was my time. I hope there's some questions, or if there's any time for questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you really did your best to keep it on time. So let's have, take the time for at least one question, if we have any. Do we have a question? Yes.
So, what would you say is the biggest? What was the biggest challenge for you implementing the integration between Phoenix Test and Playwright?
Good question. So I worked on the Wallaby one first, and then kind of took the learnings to apply it to Playwright. And I think it's just like Phoenix Test has some assumptions in the matches. For example, when it comes to label equality, like doing fuzzy matching or not, and it's difficult. It's different from the playwright standards. So right now, it's not really as plug and play as I'd like it to be, because just like some of the defaults are different. Apart from that, I think it was a lot easier than expected because the API or the model already fits quite well. And the reason for that is probably because Herman had a look at Ruby before, and they've done this whole thing with the whole drivers and the Selenium and Cuprite driver, right? And like the model matches quite well already. So less stumbling blocks than expected, I guess. Yeah. Thanks.
All right. One question from Huva. Is there some work currently happening for adding Playwright to Phoenix Tests where we can track progress?
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's happening. Just have a look in the Phoenix Test GitHub repo. It's an open pull request, still in draft, but I think it's fairly small because, like I said, it matches quite well. So it should be readable. And yeah, looking forward to any comments on that.
All right, cool. Thank you once more.
Thank you.